A girl kneels on one knee at her graduation ceremony and proposes to a boy. Soon, they are married. Lianen thinks she is the luckiest woman in the world. While others are still worrying about finding a job, she is already living a life of luxury. What's more, her husband, Yufifan, is a famous writer. Lianen thought she had skipped the hard-working chapter of a TV drama and gone straight to a happy ending. But this shortcut she thought was foolproof turned out to be a dead end. That day, Yufifan was attending an important event, but Lianen's phone kept ringing non-stop. During the intermission, Yufifan finally answered, but he had forgotten to turn off his headset. As a result, everyone present heard their entire conversation clearly. Yufifan only realized the severity of the situation after his female assistant reminded him. He then hung up the phone impatiently. Upon learning that their conversation had been overheard, Yufifan was furious. Lianen was so angry at her husband's behavior that she packed her bags and prepared to leave home. Her 5-year-old son had already grown accustomed to his mother's behavior. Just as Lianen was on her way to the airport, her husband suddenly called. She had assumed he was just trying to placate her as usual. As she hesitated whether to answer the call, her foot accidentally slipped off the brake, causing her to collide with the car in front. While the two were negotiating, Dodo suddenly informed his mother that the car was out of gas. What she had thought was just a simple traffic accident turned out to be the beginning of their fate. At that moment, Yufifan discovered through consumption records that Lianen had purchased a ticket to the UK. He immediately set off in pursuit. As a result, Lianen was caught by Yufifan the moment she got off the car. He wanted Lianen to come home and talk about whatever was on her mind. However, Lianen was still throwing a tantrum and refused to go home. As the two were struggling, Su Lang walked over. Upon hearing the word lawyer, Lianen froze in shock. It was then that she realized Yufifan was serious this time. Before Su Lang could say a word, Lianen slapped him across the face. However, after a night of reflection, Lianen dragged her luggage back home, perhaps still clinging to a sliver of hope. She asked Yufifan again if he was serious about the divorce. Upon receiving his affirmative response, Lianen burst into tears. Even so, Yufifan didn't even give her a simple hug. He even demanded that Lianen not come to see Dodo for the next few days. After saying that, he turned around and went back inside, slamming the door shut. But Lianen didn't leave for a long time, perhaps hoping that Yufifan would open the door again and say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Later, Lianen found her best friend, Xiao Di, for comfort. Xiao Di also happened to be Yufifan's cousin. Lianen refused to accept the divorce without a clear explanation. With Xiao Di's help, she went to his victory banquet. Unexpectedly, before she even entered the banquet hall, she bumped into Su Lang. Seeing this, Su Lang quickly pulled Lianen aside. After the previous rear-end collision, Su Lang knew that Lianen was a simple-minded and impulsive person. He feared she might do something reckless in such an important setting. He kindly advised her to think things through before acting. However, Lianen didn't want her husband to be humiliated today. She only wanted to see her son. As Yufifan's legal representative, Su Lang refused her request outright and suggested she leave the venue immediately. Just as the two were talking, two dolls walked past them. Lianen immediately had an idea. Since she couldn't meet her son openly, she would dress up like her son and sneak a peek at him. Just as she was about to get closer and touch her son, Yufifan walked over and took Dodo with him. As she left, Lianen only gently held Dodo's hand. The child was right in front of her, yet she couldn't speak to him. This feeling deeply hurt Lianen's heart. When she dragged her tired body back to the hotel, she suddenly saw a familiar figure. Su Lang was also startled by Lianen's sudden appearance and insisted that this was his room. The two looked at each other in confusion. Whose room was this? When both of them took out their room cards, the answer was quickly revealed. It turned out that Lianen had taken the wrong key card, causing this big mix-up. However, just as she was about to leave, Yufifan suddenly knocked on Su Lang's door. In a panic, Su Lang calmly told Lianen that Yufifan couldn't see the two of them in the same room. He then told Lianen to hide in the corner on the second floor. To find out the real reason behind Yufifan's insistence on divorce, Lianen had no choice but to comply. Yufifan told Su Lang many stories about their relationship. He admitted that he and Lianen had once shared a beautiful time. However, over time, their communication grew increasingly scarce. Every night, He would return home exhausted only to face Lianen's unreasonable tantrums. Meanwhile, Lianen didn't even bother to check on her son sleeping on the sofa. This was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Therefore, Euphifen could no longer tolerate such a Lianen, and divorce was the only way for both parties to find relief. Hiding in the corner, Lianen listened to everything Euphifen said and was already in tears. After Euphifen left, Lianen immediately chased after him. She suddenly realized the pressure that had been building up in Euphifen over the years. She had enjoyed the tenderness and protection Euphifen had given her, becoming a selfish and spoiled person. But at that moment, she wanted to tell Euphifen that she would become a mature person. But to her surprise, when she saw her husband again, there was another woman by his side. Lianen saw with her own eyes the man she had loved for 5 years being affectionate with another woman, and her heart was completely shattered. At that moment, she finally understood that you should never expect to keep someone who has made up their mind to leave. In despair, she agreed to her husband's divorce and proactively scheduled a meeting with a lawyer to discuss the details. Fortunately, Euphifen still had a conscience and agreed to give Lianen a generous compensation in the divorce agreement. If anyone else saw such an agreement, they might think that the years of their youth were not wasted, but Lianen felt that her husband's pity and sympathy for her were meaningless at this point. Lianen could only follow the procedure and write down the required amount in the divorce agreement. Next, Su Lang made a demand that she could not accept. He wanted custody of the child to be granted to the father. Su Lang told her that if she was not satisfied, she could make counter-proposals. Lianen thought this was completely unreasonable. What mother would trade her child for conditions? She accused Su Lang of being a father who would say such heartless things just to make money. If his wife and child knew that he was making money this way to support his family, they would probably feel guilty. Faced with Lianen's sharp words, Su Lang said that the child's mother had left them when she was very young. Therefore, he didn't have to worry about this issue at all. Hearing this, Lianen was even more dissatisfied with Su Lang. Seeing that it was impossible to continue the conversation, Su Lang left the contract behind and was about to leave. He told Lianen to think it over and contact him at any time. Seeing this, Lianen immediately made her position clear. I've already thought it through very clearly. I will not give up custody. Lianen then asked her best friend to hire a lawyer. However, the lawyer told her that she didn't stand much of a chance, since she had gotten married right after graduating from college and had never worked. The other side's lawyer would definitely present a lot of evidence to prove that she was incapable of raising a child. In order to protect Lianen's interests, the lawyer advised her to focus on the division of property as much as possible. However, Lianen's goal was clear. She would do whatever it took to get custody of her son. Lianen felt that she was a fine arts graduate, so finding a job shouldn't be too difficult. But reality soon dealt her a harsh blow. She went job hunting with her resume, but no company was willing to hire her. In this era of abundant talent, 5 years as a full-time mother had left her severely out of touch with society. Therefore, she had no choice but to accept reality. Soon, the day of the court hearing arrived. Once so deeply in love, Euphifen now walked past her without even glancing at her. This left Lianen's heart shattered. Though she sat on the cold, impersonal defendant's bench, Lianen's heart wasn't on the case at all. Euphifen had once been the person closest to her, but now he had become her enemy. They had once loved each other so deeply that they could see stars in each other's eyes. They had envisioned a future where they walked hand in hand with their children and a dog along the beach. But now, all they could see in each other's eyes were the cold, impersonal legal terms on the pages of a document. She thought she hated Euphifen with all her heart. But at this moment, the best memories of the two of them together floated into her mind. She vaguely remembered the happy expression on Euphyfen's face 5 years ago when he found out she was pregnant. Thinking of this, she even wanted to stand up and declare a truce to fight for their marriage one more time. But she didn't do it because she saw in Euphyfen's eyes the exhaustion of wanting to end everything as soon as possible. Those once happy moments now seemed so insignificant and trivial. With the gavel falling, Lianen lost custody of her son. Her relationship with Euphifen officially came to an end in the worst possible way. Beautiful moments often only exist in memories. Love is real, and so is the absence of it. Euphifen once regarded Lianen as the center of his life. Now, The two had become bitter enemies, and Euphethan had taken away the custody of their child from Lianen in such a heartless manner. Lianen was filled with grievances and had nowhere to vent her emotions, so she chose to drown her sorrows in alcohol at a bar. But at that moment, she had no money and could only use her car keys to pay. The waiter had never seen such an unusual way of paying before. At that moment, Lianen suddenly thought of Su Lang. It was with his help that Euphethan had taken custody of their son from Lianen. Facing Lianen's sarcastic remarks, Su Lang chose to hang up the phone, because at that moment, he had a more pressing issue to deal with. Just the day before, Su Lang's ex-girlfriend Shinman had suddenly appeared at his law firm. 6 years ago, they had been an enviable couple on campus. After graduation, Shenman had ruthlessly abandoned Su Lang to go abroad. After moving abroad, Shenman's career had flourished. In a short time, she had become a top real estate consultant for Chinese expatriates in the UK. However, she felt that there wasn't much room for advancement in the UK, so she chose to return to China. Although she said this, the real reason she returned was to win Su Lang back. But 6 years had changed everything. Su Lang didn't want to get back together with Shenman. Shenman confessed to Su Lang that she envied girls who got married right after graduation. But Su Lang didn't respond. Shenman didn't give up. She knew Su Lang had the habit of morning runs. Just as Su Lang didn't know how to refuse, Lianen called. It turned out she had been drinking heavily at a bar and was unconscious. Upon hearing the news, Su Lang rushed over immediately. He angrily scolded Lianen, asking why she had so many contacts in her phone yet called him. Lianen replied that he was at the top of her contact list. Su Lang was at a loss for words, but he decided to take photos at the scene as evidence first. He then gently woke Lianen up and planned to take her home. Perhaps the alcohol had numbed her brain. Lianen mistook Su Lang for Euphethan. Su Lang immediately called Euphethan. However, Euphethan was busy with social engagements and didn't answer the call. At that moment, Lianen grabbed Su Lang's phone and threw it into an ice bucket. Su Lang saw this and immediately dropped her to pick up the phone, but it was too late. Now not only was Lianen's brain waterlogged, but her phone was too. Su Lang was frustrated and angrily scolded Lianen, asking if she had a problem with her brain. Facing Su Lang's accusations, Lianen immediately admitted her mistake. Su Lang didn't blame her too much and got up to take her home. At this moment, Lianen grabbed Su Lang's arm and wouldn't let him leave her. Seeing Lianen in tears, Su Lang suddenly felt pity for her. Having lost her husband and son at the same time, no one was more miserable than her. Su Lang decided to be a good Samaritan and took her to a hotel. Unexpectedly, the hotel receptionist mistook him for a pervert and was about to call the police. With no other choice, Su Lang could only take Lianen back to his home. The next day, she enjoyed Su Lang's special wake-up service. Su Lang began to shake Lianen's pillow. Seeing that she was moving, he wanted to hurry her up and get her out of bed. Unexpectedly, Lianen just turned over. She still wasn't waking up, so Su Lang had no choice but to bring out his big move. Finally, he exhausted all his strength and rewarded himself with a flying kick. When Lianen woke up, she looked confused, faced with Su Lang's relentless pursuit. Lianen screamed in fear and cursed Su Lang, calling him a hooligan and insisting that he had taken advantage of her. He then took out the video he had recorded in advance. Lianen was embarrassed as she watched the video of herself sleeping. She couldn't face Su Lang and could only choose to quickly escape. Just as she was about to leave, Su Lang's daughter Guoguo woke up. Guoguo immediately asked her father who he had been talking to. Children are easy to deceive, and Su Lang dismissed her with a few words. But the next person wasn't so easy to fool. The two sneaked downstairs, only to find Su Lang's ex-girlfriend standing at the door. It turned out that Shinman had planned to go jogging with Su Lang that morning. She couldn't get through to Su Lang's cell phone, so she came straight here. Lianen thought she was about to get out of this awkward situation, but when she looked down and saw her bare feet, she had no choice but to go back and get her shoes. Shinman immediately asked Su Lang if he was dating Lianen. Su Lang immediately denied it. Guoguo ran out of the house at that moment. Shenman saw the little girl with an expression of disbelief. She had come to reconcile with Su Lang, but it seemed her hopes were dashed. The next day, Lianen decided to pick herself up. With her best friend's help, she found a job as a waitress. After being a full-time housewife for 6 years, she now served others without complaint, because she had to get custody of her daughter. Lianen studied hard to learn how to make coffee, trying over and over again something she had never done before. But no matter how hard it was, she had to persevere. She needed a job to qualify to fight her ex-husband for custody of her child. It would also keep her busy and help her forget all the terrible things that had happened. She didn't want to be a self-pitying woman anymore. Therefore, she decided to adapt to society with a brand new attitude. However, Yufifen's lawyer wasn't optimistic about her chances. That day, Su Lang, acting on Yufifen's behalf, brought a document for Lianen to sign. But Lianen, considering that her current situation was all due to Yufifen and Su Lang, dared not sign her name lightly. She refused, citing that she couldn't handle personal matters during work hours, and planned to take the document home to read it carefully word for word. Su Lang was a little impatient and advised her to find a lawyer to help her with the divorce. Lianen said frankly that she would find a good lawyer who would help her regain custody of Dodo. Su Lang said sarcastically, "You can't even hold down a waitress job for 3 days. Let's talk about it later." She was looked down upon on her first day at work. Lianen's anger was instantly ignited. She turned back and decided to let Su Lang get to know her better. "My English is at level 6. I also went to university and studied art design, specializing in Chinese animation. I even won an award once." She once had her own dreams, but as soon as she graduated, she chose love and gave up her career. However, she didn't think it was something to be ashamed of, because she believed that all the setbacks she was facing now were only temporary. With that, she turned and left casually. These words did indeed make Su Lang look at her with new respect. Although her words were righteous and stern, Lianen no longer had the confidence she had back then. That day, she unexpectedly ran into her childhood friend, Lei Yu, at a coffee shop. Lei Yu, whom she hadn't seen in many years, was now a successful lawyer with a reputation both at home and abroad. Coincidentally, Lianen was fighting for custody of her child, so Qiu Di suggested that Lei Yu be her lawyer, but Lianen was too embarrassed to do so. Besides, she was just a housewife fighting for custody of her child, so there was no need to bother such a big lawyer. Then Qiu Di told her some good news. The annual Star Manga Awards were about to begin. Back in the day, Lianen was the champion of the Star Manga Award, so Qiu Di encouraged her to enter the competition. But Lianen refused. Besides the custody battle, there was an even more important reason. Yufifen was one of the judges this year, but Qiu Di didn't care about that, so she went ahead and entered Lianen into the competition on her own. Meanwhile, after his divorce, Yufifen wasn't idle either. He had brought his female assistant back home, facing the items Lianen left behind. Yufifen instructed his assistant to pack them up and send them away. Men are indeed like this. When they love you, they'll even pluck the stars and moon for you. When they don't love you, even a single glance feels like too much. The penniless female assistant suddenly found herself living in such a luxurious house, and her heart couldn't help but rejoice. She sweetly thanked Yufifen, her words tinged with a hint of ambiguity. Wooly joined the company right after graduating from college. She lived far away from her parents. As her teacher, Yufifen naturally took good care of his student, but he didn't know that he was already a big fish about to be caught. The two were talking when Dodo suddenly ran over. When he saw a strange woman in his home, he froze for a moment. Then he looked around to make sure his mother wasn't there and ran away angrily. Yufifen noticed Dodo's unusual behavior and followed him. Wooly sat on the bed with a smug look on her face. Yufifen told Dodo that when he grew up, he would understand why his parents had separated. He also told him that Wooly would be staying at the house for a while and hoped that Dodo would get along well with her. Dodo said angrily that if she dared to move in, he would make her pay. However, Yufifen did not take his son's fierce rebuttal seriously. The next day, he was unable to leave work, so he asked Su Lang to pick up his son and let him stay at his house for the night. As his lawyer, Su Lang kindly reminded him that they had fought hard to win custody of the child. He hoped that Yufifen would cherish this opportunity, especially since Lianen was still considering an appeal. If he couldn't take good care of the child, the other party still had a chance to regain custody. Therefore, Su Lang suggested that Yufifen have a calm discussion with Lianen to work out the best time-sharing arrangement for the child. This would also dispel the other party's intention to appeal. However, Yufifan did not take Su Lang's kind reminder to heart. He thought that Lianen was still the same Lianen who was only capable of being selfish and throwing tantrums. In order to regain custody, Lianen had already started looking through various materials and collecting evidence that would be favorable to herself. She read the clauses in the book and recalled every little detail of her time with her child, but after comparing them, she still didn't have a chance of winning. At this moment, her old classmate Lei Yu suddenly appeared. Lianen didn't want her classmates to know about her divorce, so she quickly put the book away, but he accidentally saw it. Seeing that she couldn't hide it anymore, luckily Qiu Di appeared in time to help her out. Qiu Di took advantage of the situation and asked Lei Yu, who was a lawyer, about custody issues under the pretext of writing. Lianen asked if she could regain custody by proving that the other party had neglected the child. Although Lei Yu gave her an affirmative answer, she still faced a very difficult problem. She had to find direct evidence that the other party had neglected the child. This was a relatively difficult task. Lianen was once again at a loss. At that moment, she suddenly remembered that she had not yet delivered the documents Su Lang had asked her to sign. She hurried to Su Lang's house. As soon as she arrived at the door, Lianen heard what sounded like her son's voice coming from inside the house. In order to catch a glimpse of her son, Lianen moved a ladder and leaned it against a large tree. Even though she encountered difficulties, she did not back down because all she wanted at that moment was to see her son. Just as she was about to stand up to investigate further, she was unexpectedly spotted by the security guard of the residential complex. The commotion quickly attracted other residents of the complex, and Su Lang was also drawn to the scene. Lianen immediately explained that she knew this family and asked Su Lang to testify for her. Seeing this, Su Lang had no choice but to grit his teeth and explain to the security guard. After such a big misunderstanding, Su Lang angrily told Lianen to either come down and leave or stay in the tree by herself. Now she only had 1 minute to make a decision. At that moment, Lianen felt extremely wronged. She immediately said that she had acted that way because she heard her son's voice inside the house, perhaps because they were both parents. Su Lang's heart was suddenly moved. He suddenly felt a little sorry for this mother who had lost both her husband and her child. He then kindly brought a ladder for Lianen. Su Lang began to doubt whether it was right or wrong to help Yufifan take custody of the child away from Lianen. But soon he discovered that when Dodo's kindergarten let out, it was always Yufifan's assistant who came to pick him up. As a father, Yufifan had no time to take care of Dodo. He had spent all his time on others. That day, Yufifan told Wu Li that she had been shortlisted for the Star Manga Award. Wu Li was so excited that she hugged Yufifan tightly. The atmosphere suddenly became a little ambiguous. After Yufifan left, Wu Li was still immersed in the joy of being shortlisted, because she was one step closer to Yufifan. At the same time, Lianen also received the shortlist notification. The next day, she received several boxes of express delivery for no apparent reason. Upon opening them, she discovered they contained Dodo's photos and items left behind in the wedding room before their divorce. At that moment, Lianen felt as though her heart had been stabbed again, and tears welled up in her eyes. Just then, Wu Li called, saying that the delivery had been signed for and she wanted to confirm. Although she pretended to be nonchalant on the surface, she was actually trying to casually reveal some information to Lianen. When Wu Li heard that Lianen was angry, she first put on an innocent expression, but as soon as she hung up the phone, she immediately revealed her smug expression. Lianen hadn't yet recovered from the pain of the previous incident when she received a call from her university professor inviting her to attend the farewell banquet for the professors. She didn't want her classmates to know that she didn't want to divorce, so she initially didn't plan to go. But now that the professor had called to personally invite Lianen, she had no choice but to attend. But when she arrived, she discovered that Wu Li was also the professor's student. At the farewell banquet, Wu Li pretended to be enthusiastic, calling Lianen's sister repeatedly. But when she went to the restroom, she revealed her true face. Since Lianen and Yufifan had divorced, Wu Li had been rumored to be involved with Yufifan, which led to her being teased by everyone at the dinner table. Wu Li was already seething inside, but she unexpectedly overheard someone comparing her to Lianen. They believed that it was Wu Li who had been too ambitious and had thrown herself at Yufifan, leading to the misunderstanding. Otherwise, how could someone like Yufifan, with his status, possibly be interested in a county-level art student? Hearing this, Wu Li exploded with anger and walked straight to the adjacent private room. It turned out that when she arrived at the banquet, she had just seen Su Lang there. She walked over, pretended to greet Su Lang, and told him that Li Anan was also there. Then she deliberately raised her voice and said, "But it's better if you two don't meet, to avoid any awkwardness." As expected, these words reached the ears of the students outside the door. Having achieved her goal, Wu Li returned to the dinner table with a smug look on her face. Soon after, the news of Li Anan's divorce spread like wildfire among the students. Li Anan, who was unaware of what had happened, only found out through a call from her best friend that everyone already knew about her divorce. As Yu Fifan's personal assistant, the classmates wanted to find Wu Li to confirm whether the news of Li Anan's divorce was true. At this point, Wu Li did not admit that she had said anything to Su Lang, so everyone suspected that she was the one who caused Li Anan's divorce. Seeing everyone talking like this, she finally had a reason to confirm the news of their divorce. At this point, Li Anan had no choice but to admit to everyone that she and Yu Fifan had separated. Seeing that the matter had escalated, Wu Li apologized to Su Lang with an innocent look on her face, saying that she didn't mean to let it slip. However, as a lawyer, Su Lang had already seen through her little scheme. Soon, the news reached Yu Fifan's ears. Yu Fifan was very angry. He accused Wu Li of not keeping the divorce a secret. He had already told her to keep it confidential. Seeing that Yu Fifan was really angry, Wu Li tried to gain sympathy with her tears. She cried and said that she would pack her things and leave, and would not bother Yu Fifan anymore. Yu Fifan was easily swayed by Wu Li's tears and had already secretly forgiven her in his heart. Fortunately, he had already taken steps to seal the news, so he didn't plan to pursue the matter further. Instead, he comforted her, saying, "Since I've chosen you as my student, I will naturally believe you." After her plot succeeded, Wu Li stopped pretending and immediately wiped away her fake tears. Li Anan thought that a failed marriage would only cause her to lose custody of her child. She never expected that her 5-year-old son would run away from home. This blow was undoubtedly fatal to a mother. Li Anan blamed herself. She felt that she had been so immersed in the pain of divorce that she had neglected her child's feelings. In fact, it was the child's father who had caused all this. After divorcing Li Anan, Yu Fifan had his assistant move into his home. Dodo didn't like the assistant at all, so she asked her father to make her leave. But Yu Fifan didn't think it was necessary. Dodo had no choice but to deal with Wu Li in her own way. Not only that, but he also destroyed all of Wu Li's cosmetics. Seeing Wu Li's angry expression, Dodo felt quite satisfied. She had intended to chase after him to teach him a lesson, but it turned out to be another trap. Even Wu Li's skincare products had been replaced with glue and vinegar by Dodo. Wu Li was so angry that she told everything to Yu Fifan. As expected, Dodo was met with another scolding from his father. At this point, Dodo once again told Yu Fifan that he didn't want Wu Li to live in their house. Instead of comforting Dodo, Yu Fifan lectured him. "This is your father's house. Your father has the right to decide who can live here and who can't. When you grow up, you can have your own house just like your father, and you can decide for yourself." Dodo was very sad, so the next day he packed his things and decided to go find his grandfather. Guogua asked him why he couldn't let his mom and dad take him. Dodo replied seriously, "There's a ghost in the house, and only my grandfather can get rid of it." The sensible Dodo didn't plan to tell his mom about this. He was afraid that his mom would be very sad if she knew that there was a ghost in the house where he used to live. At this moment, Guogua also asked to go with Dodo to find his grandfather, so the two of them ran away together secretly. Meanwhile, his parents found that their child was missing. After searching unsuccessfully, they checked the surveillance cameras and realized what had happened. They decided to split up and search, but after searching for a long time, they still couldn't find them. Li Anan's emotions suddenly collapsed at that moment. Dodo walked a long way before realizing that he was lost. Fortunately, he was smart enough to take Guogua to a crowded place. Passers-by called the police, and Li Anan and the others also rushed to the police station. Seeing her mother for the first time since the divorce, Dodo's tears flowed freely. News of Dodo's runaway soon reached Yu Fifan's father. Upon learning that his son had divorced, Yu Fifan's father was so enraged that he fell ill on the spot. He then insisted on meeting Li Anan. He promised Li Anan that he would persuade his son to remarry her. After going through so much, Lianen was no longer the spoiled little girl she used to be. She told her former father-in-law that she would not agree to remarry him. Seeing Lianen's firm attitude, her father-in-law brought up the child again. He wanted to persuade Lianen to remarry Euphefen for the sake of the child. Lianen said that she couldn't leave her son, so she would continue to appeal. Everyone thought Euphefan's father was doing this because he couldn't bear to part with his daughter-in-law. However, he revealed his true colors, stating that custody of the child must not be given to Lianen, because Dodo is his only grandson. Therefore, Euphefan's father decided to keep Dodo by his side and raise him properly so that he could inherit the family business when he grows up. Not only that, but he also ordered Euphefen to replace Su Lang as soon as possible, because his grandson deserves a better lawyer. The next day, Su Lang received a call informing him he had been fired. To prevent Lianen from appealing, Euphefan's father hired a new lawyer to defend Dodo's custody rights. Lao Yu was unaware that Shin Man was Su Lang's girlfriend from university. Shin Man then admitted that as long as they cooperated actively, winning the case would not be difficult. That day, Lianen had to send Dodo to his grandfather's house due to unforeseen circumstances. Out of consideration for their past relationship, Lianen instinctively called him dad. At that moment, Lao Yu took the opportunity to play the emotional card. Lao Yu expressed how heartbroken he was that his grandson had to understand something even adults couldn't comprehend at such a young age. Therefore, he urged Lianen to compromise and stop causing trouble for the child. He claimed that Dodo should choose a relatively better life. Moreover, the two families lived nearby, so she could visit Dodo anytime she wanted. However, when she divorced Euphefen, Lianen had already experienced the pain of not being able to see her son. Therefore, she no longer trusted Lao Yu's casual promises. She believed that keeping the child by her side was the only way to feel secure. Thus, regardless of the outcome, she would not give up appealing the decision. Perhaps this is what every mother would do: sacrifice everything but never give up her child. Seeing that the negotiations had failed, Lao Yu's expression suddenly changed. He stood up without saying a word and was about to leave. Before leaving, Lianen told Lao Yu that she had agreed to let Dodo go play tomorrow. But the next day, when Lianen arrived at the kindergarten, she found that Dodo hadn't come to school. At that moment, Euphefen suddenly appeared and took Lianen to meet his father. As soon as they met, Lao Yu introduced Lianen to his new lawyer, and told her that since she didn't want to remarry, she didn't have to call him dad anymore. At this point, Lianen could say nothing more. All she wanted was to take Dodo home and fulfill her promise to him. But Lao Yu told her that Dodo wasn't at home. Hearing this, Lianen panicked. She knew that Lao Yu had hidden Dodo, so she humbled herself and begged Lao Yu to let her see Dodo. But Lao Yu was also very clear: as long as Lianen didn't give up the appeal, she wouldn't see Dodo. This was the first time Euphefen had spoken up for Lianen since their divorce. In order to regain custody of her son, Lianen insisted on appealing. Eupefen's father, determined to keep his grandson by his side, hired a renowned lawyer at great expense to take on Lianen. On the day of the negotiations, Shen Man listed one by one all the ways in which Lianen was an unfit mother. She first pointed out that Lianen not only lacked the ability to earn money but also had monthly expenses of over 10,000 yuan. As Lianen's lawyer, Lei Yu was about to argue that material conditions didn't mean anything, but Shin Man didn't give him a chance to speak, insisting on discussing the child's mental health. She then pulled out Dodo's medical records, which she had prepared in advance, and threw them at Lianen. She defended herself by saying that Dodo was a healthy child who had never been hospitalized for a cold or fever. However, she claimed that Dodo had frequently been hospitalized for sprains, bruises, burns, and even fractures. Shin Man therefore concluded that Lianen was a careless mother. She argued that if Lianen couldn't even provide basic care and attention, how could she possibly ensure the child's mental health? In the end, Shin Man even claimed that Lianen was fighting for custody in order to get more child support. Completely rejected by someone who didn't understand her at all, Lianen finally couldn't take it anymore. She stood up and retorted to Shin Man, "How can you be so stupid and despicable as to say such irresponsible things without even investigating? I am a full-time housewife, but I am responsible for all the household expenses, including daily expenses and my children's education." Although she is a full-time housewife, she is responsible for all the household expenses, including daily miscellaneous expenses, her child's education, and the nanny's salary. Even though she sometimes buys things for herself, she is very selective and only buys things she really wants. Under these circumstances, is it excessive to spend tens of thousands of dollars a month? Shin Man was instantly speechless. As for Shin Man's opinion that the child had a careless mother, Li Anan felt extremely wronged. Since having a child, Li Anan had given up her own life. Dodo was her whole world, but Dodo was an adventurous boy. So even though Li Anan was as careful as she could be, she couldn't always prevent Dodo from getting hurt. Although it pained her, she had no regrets and would never stop Dodo from taking risks. This is how Li Anan loves Dodo. After saying this, Li Anan left the negotiation table with a heavy heart. As a lawyer, Lei Yu barely spoke during the negotiations. He was highly critical of Shin Man's abrupt negotiation style. He planned to cross-reference the dates provided in the medical records with Yu Fifan's schedule to determine how many times Yu Fifan, as the father, had been present during Dodo's injuries. Lei Yu also said that they would find witnesses and testimonies to prove that Li Anan was a good mother. Yu Fifan, who was standing nearby, knew very well how much he had neglected his child over the past 5 years and how much Li Anan had sacrificed for their child, so he immediately made his position clear. Although he wanted to keep Dodo with him, he would not do anything to hurt Li Anan. After all, she had done nothing wrong from the beginning. Shin Man stated that she had been following Lao Yu's instructions. Yu Fifan turned on her immediately. Although you were hired by Lao Yu to fulfill your duties, this is my marriage, my child, and my family. Xiao Di obtained Yu Fifan's travel records for the past year to help Li Anan regain custody. Yu Fifan had barely been home in the past year, let alone taken care of Dodo. With the physical evidence, all that was left was the witness testimony. Li Anan said that Dodo's kindergarten teacher and some close neighbors were willing to testify in court, but what they didn't know was that Shin Man had already arranged everything in advance. The witnesses' hopes were dashed, and Li Anan was at a loss for what to do. At that moment, Lei Yu told her that as long as she could win the Star Manga Award, she could prove that she had a stable income to support Dodo. Plus, with Yu Fifan's itinerary, even without witnesses, she would definitely help her regain custody. This gave Li Anan a new burst of motivation. On the day of the competition, Li Anan arrived at the venue full of confidence, but just before the competition began, she was locked in a warehouse by Wu Li. It turned out that Wu Li had only found out that day that the competition would be judged not only by the judges but also by live audience members. Wu Li knew that he was no match for Li Anan, so he found an excuse to take her to the storage room and quietly locked the door. As a result, Li Anan was unable to appear at the competition. Without Li Anan as a competitor, Wu Li naturally became the focus of the competition. Just as Yu Fifan was about to vote for Wu Li, Li Anan suddenly appeared. It turned out that Li Anan, who had been locked up, had not given up. She used whatever materials she could find and finished her creation on a piece of cloth. At the last moment of the competition, Su Lang was looking at the photos his daughter had taken for him when he accidentally discovered Li Anan in the video. He had thought that Li Anan had not come to the competition and had run away at the last minute. He didn't expect that she had been locked up by Wu Li, so he immediately rushed over and rescued Li Anan. The judges also went to the warehouse to investigate the situation. Although it could be proven that Li Anan's painting was original, the competition rules required on-site creation. Therefore, Li Anan was ultimately disqualified from the competition. Upon learning of Wu Li's actions, Yu Fifan approached her. "Don't you think your championship is undeserved?" At first, Wu Li tried to act as if she knew nothing. Then Yu Fifan showed her the video. However, upon seeing the video, Wu Li did not admit her mistake but instead argued that a single video clip couldn't prove anything. In fact, Yu Fifan had already retrieved the surveillance footage from that time, which clearly recorded every one of her actions. At this point, Wu Li finally stopped pretending and pleaded with Yu Fifan for mercy. However, as Yu Fifan's assistant and her most trusted student, and had done such a thing, so Yu Fifan was determined not to forgive her. Yu Fifan only realized now how good his ex-wife had been, and his heart began to waver unconsciously. Upon learning that Li Anan was working overtime, he specially bought the fried rice with eggs from their favorite restaurant from university days. Just like when they were dating, he instinctively prepared chopsticks for Li Anan. This scene couldn't help but remind Li Anan of the time when they first started dating. So romantic and passionate, her lips couldn't help but curve upward. Faced with Yu Fifan's sudden concern, Lianen was both surprised and at a loss. After all, she and Eufifan were already in the past. Their current relationship made it impossible for her to bear such concern. Therefore, she made an excuse about having to finish her work and sent Eufifan away. Although Lianen lost her eligibility to compete in the Star Manga Award last time, her work was voted first place in the online poll. Although she didn't win the competition, in Eufifan's eyes, Lianen's work was the best, so he decided to let Lianen publish the work she created on the day of the competition as a long-form piece in extraordinary manga under the title of Folk Champion. This came as a pleasant surprise to Lianen, as it meant she would have a stable income to raise Dodo. Fortunately, Eufifan eventually gave up custody of Dodo, allowing her to keep him by her side. This became an endless source of motivation for her to become stronger. So Lianen officially began her creative journey, facing Lianen's latest painting. Her best friend thought it looked just like someone. Lianen suddenly froze. Although the little cat in the story was also a lawyer, she refused to admit that it was Su Lang. Cho D, with years of experience in the industry, told her that if she wanted more people to see her work, she needed a story worth digging into. She then took advantage of Lianen's absence to post Su Lang's photo online. Jodi claimed that Su Lang was the real-life inspiration for the lawyer in the comic. That day, Lianen brought her son to play, and coincidentally, Su Lang also brought his daughter there. The two were mistaken for a couple and were called up to participate in a game together. They asked the children to write down their favorite card. However, to select the card they had written, they needed to perform a little magic. The host immediately said that the magic could only be performed if the parents kissed each other. At that moment, both of them were panicking, but they couldn't resist the children's pleading. To avoid disappointing the children, they had no choice but to go along with the performance. The audience below immediately recognized them as the lawyer and the author from the comic, Lianen. They then posted their photos online. Eufifan watched Lianen and Su Lang's intimate gestures with a mix of emotions. Although he was the one who had initiated the divorce, now it seemed that the person who no longer belonged to him was still on his mind. After leaving Eufifan, Lianen was no longer the spoiled housewife she once was. She found a job at Han Fei Studio working on comics. However, since she had chosen to marry right after graduation, she had been out of work for 6 years and was now being ostracized by her colleagues and mocked for her lack of professional skills. To establish herself in the studio, she had to work twice as hard as others. While everyone else went out to eat and socialize, Lianen chose to stay behind and work on her drafts. With only a few days left before the deadline, Lianen suddenly realized that the drafts she had already completed had mysteriously disappeared. She thought it might be a computer malfunction. In reality, Wu Li had secretly deleted her work. It turned out that after the last Star Manga Award competition, Eufifan was deeply disappointed by Wu Li's underhanded tactics to win the competition. He fired her from the company. However, since Wu Li was his protege, Eufifan couldn't bear to let her leave completely. He assigned her to Han Fei Studio as an assistant. Now that the sketches were lost, Lianen had no choice but to start over. Fortunately, there were still a few days left before the deadline, so she worked through several all-nighters. However, just as she was about to finish, she was suddenly told to submit the work early. All her colleagues had already finished, and she was the only one holding up the progress. As a result, Lianen was harshly reprimanded by the company's leadership. Wu Li watched Lianen being scolded but felt secretly satisfied. In order to make Lianen look bad, she deliberately asked Han Fei to move up the deadline. Lianen was devastated and could only hide away and cry silently. This scene was witnessed by Su Lang. Seeing Lianen so sad, Su Lang felt very sorry for her. He couldn't help but go over to comfort her. He told Lianen that instead of spending time regretting why she gave up her job and her dreams 6 years ago, she should spend her time improving herself, but to spend that time improving her professional skills. Just as he was speaking, Lianen suddenly saw a frog at her feet, and jumped into Su Lang's arms in fear. Just a few days ago, Su Lang opened his own law firm, and agreed to serve as Eufifan's legal advisor for comics and be responsible for all of their company's copyright matters. Although Eufifan had approached Su Lang to ask him to represent his company's copyright matters, but whenever she thought about Su Lang's rumored affair with his ex-wife, Eufifan felt a mix of emotions. Watching Su Lang walk away, Yufifan couldn't help but recall the intimate moments he shared with Lianen. Whenever Lianen was sad or upset, Su Lang would always be there to comfort her. Without realizing it, Su Lang had become her shield. It was the day of the grand opening celebration for Su Lang law firm. Lianen, who hadn't had time to buy a formal dress, showed up at the ceremony full of VIPs wearing her casual home clothes. Having skipped breakfast, she saw all the pastries in front of her and started eating them greedily without caring about her appearance. This behavior immediately drew strange glances from those around her. Su Lang, who was standing in the distance, saw Lianen's awkward situation and thoughtfully brought her a cup of hot water. He then took Lianen to the dressing room, changed her into his spare shirt, and used his belt to make a simple decoration. After Su Lang's dressing, Lianen immediately became much more energetic. Looking at herself in the mirror, who looked like a completely different person, Lianen couldn't help but praise Su Lang's skill. Su Lang, standing nearby, said proudly that he was a man with a daughter. At that moment, Yufifan, Su Lang's first major client, also arrived at the ceremony. During the subsequent interview, the reporter brought out intimate photos of Su Lang and his ex-wife. Yufifan was already upset about the rumors between Su Lang and Lianen. The reporter's question completely enraged him. The two then got into a fight. Afterwards, considering that they were once husband and wife, Lianen wanted to comfort him, but at that moment, Yufifan did not want Lianen to see him in such a sorry state, so he found an excuse to send her away. At this moment, Su Lang walked over. Yufifan could no longer hold back his inner feelings. He told Su Lang that Lianen was a person who judged things based on her heart rather than her brain. Sometimes she was emotional and he didn't want her to get hurt again. Su Lang, who was slow to understand, didn't seem to know what Yufifan meant when he said this, but he said frankly that he knew Lianen was an adult with her own judgment. Her views and understanding of the problem, including how to solve it, might be different from his. Hearing Su Lang's answer, Yufifan smiled without saying anything. Perhaps he suddenly realized that he had been married to Lianen for 6 years, yet now he understood her less than Su Lang, whom he had known for only a few months. That night, Su Lang stared at the gift Lianen had given him, lost in thought. It was a comic book his daughter had drawn, and Su Lang's heart was unknowingly warmed by Lianen. He then placed the comic book in a frame and put it on the most prominent spot on his bedside table. The next day, Hanfei's studio suddenly discovered that there were issues with the samples they had received. Someone needed to go in person to negotiate the details with the other party. However, it happened to be Valentine's Day, so none of the other colleagues were willing to travel. Ultimately, the task fell on Lianen, the divorced individual. Fortunately, the negotiations went smoothly, and the other party finally agreed to remake the batch according to the requirements. However, the earliest they could be ready was tomorrow evening. With no other option, Lianen had to wait until the next evening to receive the samples. Lianen immediately rushed to the station to catch the night bus back home. She had promised Dodo that she would return no matter how late it was to spend Valentine's Day with him. At that moment, Su Lang suddenly saw a news report about a traffic accident. He was deeply concerned about Lianen's safety, but he couldn't get through to her on the phone. A sense of foreboding immediately overwhelmed him. All he could think about was whether Lianen had gotten into an accident. Without even changing his clothes, he rushed out the door. However, when Su Lang arrived, he found that the company had already closed for the day. He woke up the security guard and asked to go inside to look for Lianen, but was firmly refused. Looking at the building just a few steps away, Su Lang desperately hoped that Lianen was inside. In desperation, he called Lianen again, but the call still didn't go through. At this point, Su Lang was on the verge of collapse. He went to the station and found out that the last train to Shanghai had not yet departed. Su Lang finally breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, Lianen saw that there was still some time before the train departed, so she went to a nearby food stall to eat. Unexpectedly, she was targeted by several thugs. When she finished paying and walked back, she was blocked by 4 men on the road. Lianen was so scared that she immediately handed over all her valuables to them, but it was clear that they weren't after her money. The thugs started to attack her. Facing these strong men, Lianen, a weak woman, was completely helpless. Just when she was desperate, Su Lang appeared in front of her like a ray of light. With years of fencing experience, Su Lang quickly knocked them all to the ground, looking at Li Anan, who was still in shock. Su Lang had mixed feelings. He had 1,000 words to say, but could only remain silent. There are no words in the world to describe how wonderful it is that it was just a false alarm. At this moment, Su Lang should be very grateful that he found Li Anan in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. After leaving the police station, despite still feeling frightened, Su Lang kindly put his jacket around Li Anan. As they walked along the street, he finally couldn't help but scold Li Anan. Although he said harsh words, in Su Lang's heart, he had already regarded Li Anan as family. After their ordeal, the two went to a restaurant, which happened to be on the evening of the Qixi festival, the Chinese Valentine's Day. The two of them faced each other for the first time and had a pleasant conversation. Yu Fifan, who was on a business trip in Beijing, also heard from his cousin that Li Anan had gotten into trouble. He immediately cancelled all his work and rushed to Shanghai. However, on the way, he was informed that Li Anan had already been found by Su Lang. Although his heart was relieved, Yu Fifan still felt a sense of loss. Back then, he had divorced Li Anan no matter what. Now he could only watch helplessly as she fell into another man's arms. Just as Li Anan was facing despair, Su Lang once again led her out of the darkness. Just like the last time at the Star Manga Awards, no matter where Li Anan was held, Su Lang would eventually find her. Perhaps this was their spiritual connection. It wasn't until the next morning that the two returned to Shanghai. Li Anan went to Su Lang's house to pick up Dodo. However, their every move was secretly filmed. Soon after, news of Yu Fifan's divorce lawyer spending Valentine's Day with his ex-wife made headlines. Su Lang thought it was just an ordinary gossip news and didn't take it seriously. But for Yu Fifan, it was another heavy blow. So he took the initiative to invite Su Lang out to discuss how to resolve the matter. Su Lang said that he would send a letter to the media warning them not to spread false information. But what worried Su Lang the most was that this person knew Li Anan's whereabouts so precisely. At this moment, Yu Fifan suddenly said that he might have guessed who did it. That morning, Wu Li learned that Yu Fifan had given up the event she had been planning for 3 years for Li Anan. This made her very unhappy, so she vented her anger on Yu Fifan. She didn't expect Yu Fifan to think so highly of Li Anan. However, in the face of Wu Li's accusations, Yu Fifan immediately made his position clear to her. But before the gossip could die down, Li Anan was faced with another problem. The owner of the house they were living in was about to return to China. Therefore, they had to move out as soon as possible. But moving meant finding a new place to rent. This was an added burden for a divorced single mother. Fortunately, with the help of her best friend, they quickly found an affordable and spacious apartment. However, the apartment had to be rented to 2 people, with the condition that the tenants had to undergo an interview. After reviewing the applications, the landlord compared the two and expressed satisfaction with both. Based on the results, Li Anan and the other tenant should get along well, so he agreed to rent the house to Li Anan. However, when Li Anan moved in, she discovered that the other tenant was Su Lang. After a brief farewell, both of them seemed a bit reluctant to leave, perhaps because they were unsure of each other's feelings. Neither of them said much. Just as Li Anan was about to open the door and go inside, she finally decided to take a bold step. She actively invited Su Lang to have dinner together. Hearing Su Lang's decisive response, Li Anan's heart immediately filled with joy. She then suggested finding a restaurant nearby that Su Lang liked. However, Su Lang insisted on cooking for her. Li Anan was surprised but shyly agreed. Until she entered the door, Li Anan still couldn't hide her nervous and excited heart and hid by the door, smiling secretly. The feeling of her heart fluttering made Li Anan become a little girly, so she decided to dress up for the man she loved. This was the first time she had taken such care in her appearance since leaving Yu Fifan. She didn't even know what color lipstick to use or what style of dress to wear. In the end, she chose a white strapless dress, but just as she was about to go, she suddenly received a text message from Su Lang saying he couldn't have dinner together. It turned out that just now, Su Lang's ex-girlfriend had suddenly shown up uninvited and brought a bottle of Canadian champagne. Su Lang had wanted to refuse, but Shen Man had walked in directly. She used work as an excuse to make Su Lang cancel everything. Li Anan felt utterly dejected, but adult love isn't like the relentless entanglement of youth. So after replying with a good, she could only vent her frustration by the door. But later, during a phone call with her best friend, Li Anan learned that Shin Man was currently at Su Lang's house. Li Anan was half believing, half doubting, and decided to go to the door to investigate. But through the fence, she couldn't hear any sounds from inside the house. Li Anan asked her best friend what Shin Man was doing at Su Lang's house. After hearing her best friend's words, she became even more furious, so she climbed over the fence and pressed her ear against the door to eavesdrop, but all she heard was a loud ah from inside. It turned out that the two inside had started talking about their past university days. Shen Man, overcome by old feelings, couldn't help but lean in to kiss him. Su Lang was startled and quickly dodged, but the red wine spilled all over her. Shin Man had no choice but to change into one of Su Lang's clothes. Just then, the takeout arrived. The moment the door opened, Li Anan awkwardly froze in place. Su Lang wondered why Li Anan was there. Just as she was about to answer, she saw the scene she didn't want to see. Even though she had 1,000 words in her heart, she just said indifferently, "Keep your voice down," then turned and left. Watching Li Anan's back as she left, Su Lang realized that the woman he once loved so much was now a thing of the past. The date he had been looking forward to ended in failure. Li Anan was so angry that she kicked her leg. She tried to take a shower to calm herself down, but the fire of anger in her heart would not let her calm down. The next day, Huegua suddenly found a voice recorder in a box and threw it aside. Then she took out a few comic book manuscripts. Looking at these things, Huegua told Su Lang that they weren't theirs. After confirming this several times, Su Lang suddenly realized that Li Anan might have taken the wrong box when they moved. At this moment, Li Anan was busy repairing Su Lang's beloved toy. It turned out that on the day they moved, Li Anan thought that this box was Dodo's toys, so she let him pack it himself. As a result, Dodo accidentally broke the toys into pieces. In order to fix the toy, Li Anan asked her best friend for the instruction manual and stayed up several nights in a row. However, when she pressed the power button, it still didn't work. After checking, she found that a gear was missing. Meanwhile, Huegua was playing with the toys when she suddenly found Li Anan's voice recorder. The voice recorder was full of Li Anan's comic ideas. Huegua was so engrossed in the stories that she thought it was something her mother had left for her, and she couldn't put it down. In order not to disappoint his daughter, Su Lang reluctantly found Li Anan and asked her to give the voice recorder to Huegua. He also asked her to copy all the contents of the voice recorder onto a USB drive. Li Anan wanted to tell him about the toy, but after thinking about it, she couldn't bring herself to say anything. On this day, Han Fei's studio received an invitation to a banquet. The famous cartoonist Master Ching Shan would be collaborating with Extraordinary Comics. Those who performed well would be selected as lead writers to go to Canada to follow up on the project. Master Ching Shan would also announce the results of the proposal on the day of the banquet, but they only had a week to prepare. They quickly sent their proposal with a futuristic sci-fi theme to the Extraordinary Comics studio. That night, Wooly found Yu Fifan and begged him to give her another chance. Wooly fought for a second chance for the studio and worked through the night to put together a new proposal. However, it was merely an improvement on the original science fiction theme. Li Anan did not approve of the proposal, but she couldn't think of a better one at the moment. Wooly was confident in his proposal, but Li Anan did not agree with Wooly's proposal. Although Master Ching Shan had previously focused on science fiction, Li Anan suddenly remembered what Master Ching Shan had said in a recent media interview. If you are not satisfied with the current work, you don't have to look at it first. You should look at his background or whether there is a problem with your initial idea. Li Anan believed that Master Ching Shan wanted to say goodbye to science fiction. What she needed now was the most simple and straightforward idea. But there were only 2 hours left before the banquet. It was impossible to complete a new proposal in such a short time. At that moment, Li Anan suddenly remembered her voice recorder. For 6 years, whenever she had a new idea, she would record it in the form of a story on her voice recorder. With that in mind, she rushed home. However, Li Anan searched every corner of her house but couldn't find the voice recorder. Then she suddenly remembered that she had given the voice recorder to Huegua. Without saying a word, she rushed to Su Lang's house, but she knocked on the door for a long time and no one answered. Then she suddenly remembered that she had seen Su Lang put a spare key under a flower pot. Just as she was about to leave through the front door, Su Lang suddenly returned home. In order to avoid being discovered, Li Anan had no choice but to return the way she came. In the process, She accidentally dropped one of her high heels, but she couldn't care less at that moment and hurriedly fled back to her home. Su Lang knew that Li Anan must have done something, so he took the high heel and went to find Li Anan to ask for an explanation. After some explanation, Su Lang's anger subsided by more than half, and he even offered to take Li Anan to the banquet. He then thoughtfully helped Li Anan put on her shoes. However, Li Anan rushed to the banquet hall only to find that she was still a step too late. As expected, Wu Li's proposal was rejected by Master Qing Shan. Li Anan tried to show Master Qing Shan her proposal but was stopped. With no other choice, Li Anan staged a chance encounter in the restroom. At first, Master Qing Shan was not interested in Li Anan's proposal. Just as she was about to leave, Li Anan said, "What you want is not science fiction, but a love story." Li Anan then fought for 5 minutes for herself. She told Master Qing Shan about her idea bit by bit. Master Qing Shan was also deeply moved by Li Anan's idea. Everyone thought that Wu Li's proposal had been accepted, but when they learned that Master Qing Shan had finally chosen Li Anan's proposal, Wu Li's face immediately changed. Su Lang, who was standing nearby, seemed even more excited than Li Anan. After many unexpected encounters, Li Anan finally made up her mind. Although her previous marriage had ended in failure, this time she carefully revealed her feelings to Su Lang. Faced with this sudden confession, Su Lang was at a loss for words. Although he felt the same way as Li Anan, he didn't have the courage to take that step at that moment, so he left with a vague remark, "It's too late, I'll go back to sleep," and turned to leave. It turned out that the last time Li Anan was repairing the carousel, she accidentally overheard a woman's recording. She had assumed the woman was Su Lang's ex-wife. Li Anan believed that since Su Lang had kept the carousel, it meant he cherished the memories of their past. She hoped Su Lang would take back all the items he had left at the old store. That way, Guo could hear her mother's voice. However, Li Anan's kind suggestion instantly made Su Lang furious. "Don't mention Guo's mother in front of me. Are you so interested in other people's privacy?" Su Lang said that as a father, he had the right to decide what his daughter should know. He clearly didn't want his daughter to know anything about her mother, but Li Anan didn't think Su Lang was a good father. However, Su Lang retorted, "Who are you to lecture me?" At that moment, Li Anan suddenly felt that she had overstepped her bounds. Perhaps Su Lang didn't care about her at all. Feeling wronged, Li Anan wanted to vent her feelings on the door, but she ended up hurting herself instead. Dragging her tired body home, Li Anan secretly vowed to never mind Su Lang's affairs again. However, the next day, Su Lang's mother showed up at her door. It turned out that while cooking, Su Lang's mother realized there was no soy sauce in the house. Su Lang saw this and was about to go to the nearby supermarket to buy some, but his mother insisted on borrowing some from the neighbors. Li Anan, who was hanging clothes upstairs, saw Su Lang's mother and was so scared that she quickly hid. At that moment, Yu Fifan suddenly returned home with his son. When he saw that Su Lang was also living there, he felt deeply disappointed. As he looked around the neatly tidied house, he suddenly noticed that Li Anan seemed different from before. What surprised him even more was that Master Qing Shan had chosen Li Anan's proposal this time. Even Li Anan's eyes softened as she spoke. Yu Fifan then said that the studio had received an invitation to participate in a parent-child variety show. Li Anan agreed without hesitation, thinking that it would be a wonderful memory for her child. On the day of the camping trip, Wu Li suddenly appeared at the scene. She said that she didn't trust the others to be assistants and wanted to take care of Yu Fifan herself. Coincidentally, Dodo was complaining that he was bored and wanted to play, so Yu Fifan handed Dodo over to Wu Li. However, an accident happened shortly after. It turned out that Yu Fifan wanted Wu Li to learn more from Li Anan in the future. This made Wu Li feel very unbalanced. She thought that Li Anan only got Master Qing Shan's approval because of luck, but the next piece of news made her lose her mind. Yu Fifan said that if Li Anan returned from Canada, she would sign a long-term contract with Extraordinary Comics. Signing with Extraordinary Comics had always been Wu Li's goal. If Li Anan beat her to it, she would never have the chance to stay by Yu Fifan's side. Wu Li immediately came up with a bad idea. She immediately found Yu Fifan and offered to take care of Dodo during the 2 days of filming. After all, Wu Li had years of experience as an assistant, so Yu Fifan trusted her with Dodo. However, she deliberately took Dodo to a secluded road. Just now, when she passed by, She accidentally noticed that some of the steps were broken, so she deliberately found an excuse to make Dodo walk down there. Unaware of what was happening, Dodo excitedly ran down the steps. Wooly was terrified but followed the sound anyway. After confirming that Dodo had fallen, she ran over to tell Yufifan. Coincidentally, Su Lang, the company's lawyer, had come to discuss the details of the collaboration with the event organizers. Upon hearing that Dodo was missing, Su Lang rushed to help search for him. Fortunately, with Su Lang's help, Dodo was found quickly, but he had suffered a leg injury and needed surgery. Lianen fully understood how important a mother's presence was for a child at that moment. Therefore, she resolutely gave up the opportunity to go to Canada and chose to stay behind to accompany Dodo through the surgery. The opportunity to go abroad fell to Wu Li. Upon hearing this, Yufifan found Lianen and urged her to cherish this rare opportunity, because this would be a major turning point in Lianen's career. But for a mother, what could be more important than her child? Fortunately, the surgery went smoothly, and Dodo recovered well and was able to be discharged from the hospital soon. Su Lang knew that Lianen was careless, so he specially came to pick up Dodo from the hospital. He instructed Lianen to pay close attention to any signs of post-surgery infection in the child. Therefore, there was a possibility that his temperature might rise at night, so she needed to give him medicine regularly and take his temperature on time. Su Lang told Lianen that he was next door and to call him if there were any problems. In the middle of the night, Dodo suddenly started to run a fever. After trying to cool him down, Dodo's temperature still didn't improve. In desperation, Lianen called Su Lang, but at that moment, Su Lang was being pestered by his ex-girlfriend and had even thrown his cell phone into the water. In a panic, Lianen decided to take Dodo to the hospital. Just then, Yufifan arrived. He settled Dodo down and immediately called the doctor, who said it was just a normal reaction after surgery. Lianen finally breathed a sigh of relief, and Yufifan decided to stay the night. Yufifan suddenly felt a bit dazed. He never thought that after the divorce, he would still be able to eat the noodles Lianen made for him. Before he could say anything, Lianen suddenly interrupted him. For Lianen, facing things head-on meant truly letting go. Although she had felt resentful about Yufifan's departure in the past, she no longer wanted to be the same Lianen she had been before. Since parting ways with Yufifan, she had matured significantly and gradually grown accustomed to handling problems on her own. Despite the exhausting and challenging days of balancing work and childcare, Lianen felt an inexplicable sense of happiness, because she was no longer the little girl who used to revolve around her husband and child and only knew how to get angry when faced with problems. Seeing the Lianen before him, who was like a completely different person from before, Yufifan's sense of loss grew even stronger. Since losing Lianen, he was no longer the man who worked overtime and attended meetings every day, never coming home. Instead, he would come to spend time with Dodo whenever he had the chance. After Yufifan's careful care throughout the night, Dodo finally broke his fever. Seeing the father and son laughing and playing happily, Lianen suddenly felt unsure whether she should be happy or sad. Just as Lianen was about to send Yufifan off, she was spotted by Su Lang. His mother's words then pierced Su Lang's heart. Lianen, wearing her pajamas, thought back to how Yufifan hadn't left all night yesterday. Hearing this, Su Lang lost his appetite for breakfast. He wanted to go to the bathroom to calm down, but his mind was filled with his mother's words. He even imagined the scene of the two of them together last night. For the first time, he felt a pang of jealousy toward Lianen. It was Lianen's birthday. Her close friends and old classmates had carefully prepared a birthday party for her. Liu called Su Lang and asked him to find an excuse to take Lianen out. After hanging up, Su Lang sent Lianen a message, but he wrote and deleted it repeatedly, not knowing what to say. In the end, he sent a short message, "Are you home now?" He didn't expect her to reply immediately. Su Lang rushed over like a love-struck teenager and opened his phone. At that moment, Lianen was watering flowers in the yard. Lianen asked Su Lang what he wanted. Su Lang told her that he hadn't eaten and wanted to ask her out for dinner. Lianen asked, "You really don't have to accompany your girlfriend on the weekend?" Hearing Su Lang deny it with his own mouth, she happily ran into the house and dressed up. But when the two came out, Lianen had only washed her hands and grabbed her bag. Su Lang, on the other hand, was dressed in a suit and cool sunglasses. planning to attend Li Ainen's birthday party in formal attire. As soon as they arrived at the cafe, Xiao Di brought out the surprise she had prepared in advance. Li Ainen finally realized that Su Lang had known about her birthday all along. She never expected Su Lang to go along with her best friend to do something so romantic. At that moment, Li Ainen's heart was completely melted. She couldn't help but hug Su Lang like a little girl. This was their first hug since her divorce from Yu Fifan. Li Ainen hadn't felt this happy in a long time. The audience couldn't help but clap and congratulate them. And they also gave Li Ainen birthday gifts. Just as everyone was getting ready to cut the cake, Xiao Di tried to sneakily throw the cake at Li Ainen's face. But Li Ainen had already guessed her best friend's little trick and dodged the attack perfectly. However, the cake landed squarely on Su Lang's face. In the past, Su Lang would have been furious and walked away. But today was Li Ainen's birthday, so after being stunned for a moment, he not only ate the cake off his lips but also took some and smeared it on Li Ainen's face. This move made Li Ainen laugh so hard. When Su Lang came out of the bathroom after washing up, Li Ainen blocked the door. Although she had received many gifts, what Li Ainen wanted most was Su Lang's gift. Faced with Li Ainen's expectations, Su Lang was at a loss for words. He had only found out that today was Li Ainen's birthday in the afternoon. Before Su Lang could take out the gift, Li Ainen happily said she liked it. Perhaps this is the power of love. When you truly love someone, anything they give you becomes a treasure. When Su Lang finally handed over the gift, Li Ainen was moved once again. It was a fountain pen that Su Lang's professor had given him when he was in college. The words "Lucky Pen" were specially engraved on it. Holding this pen, which held such special meaning for Su Lang, Li Ainen suddenly realized how important she was to Su Lang. At that moment, Yu Fifan suddenly appeared and brought Li Ainen a birthday gift. However, compared to the expensive bracelet, Li Ainen preferred Su Lang's pen, so when she casually took Yu Fifan's gift, she couldn't help but look in Su Lang's direction. But Su Lang had already disappeared. He knew that Yu Fifan had rekindled his old feelings for Li Ainen. At that moment, he didn't know what his role was there, so he chose to make a dignified exit. Li Ainen's godmother saw what Li Ainen felt for Su Lang, but she didn't think highly of their relationship, so she wanted to persuade Li Ainen to remarry Yu Fifan for Dodo's sake. But for Li Ainen, the feelings between her and Yu Fifan had long since turned into familial love, so she firmly stated her position. That day, Lei Yu and the others discussed taking a few days off to relax during the holiday. As a homebody, Su Lang had originally planned to stay at home, but when he heard that Li Ainen was going, he agreed to the trip for the first time in his life. Yu Fifan's aunt heard about this and rushed to Yu Fifan's office. She feared that Li Ainen and Su Lang might grow closer during the vacation. She strongly urged Yu Fifan to join them and try to reconcile with Li Ainen. However, since she was the one who had initially proposed the divorce, she felt deeply regretful. Yu Fifan felt that he had no right to force Li Ainen anymore. Moreover, Li Ainen had already made it clear that she did not want to return to her old life. If Li Ainen found another partner and that person was Su Lang, Dodo would gladly accept them forming a new family. Could he accept that? Hearing his younger sister say this, Yu Fifan was still unwilling to give up. So, on the day Li Ainen and the others arrived at the resort, he also came there. Li Ainen was very surprised because Yu Fifan had never taken a vacation before. Yu Fifan told Li Ainen that her aunt had insisted on asking her to come find her. This sudden news really shocked Li Ainen. In the afternoon, everyone agreed to go hiking, but at the last minute, Li Ainen fainted. It was then that Yu Fifan realized that Li Ainen had a fever, so she took her back to her room. Not only did she feed her some medicine to lower her fever, she also made her some hot soup and took her temperature before leaving. In the middle of the night, Li Ainen was dazed and seemed to see Su Lang, until she woke up the next morning. Li Ainen thought it was just a dream, but when she went downstairs, she really saw Su Lang. Only then did she realize that Su Lang had rushed over after work last night. Upon hearing this, Li Ainen's mood brightened. During dinner that night, Xiao Di suggested that everyone play a game. The rules were that whoever the bottle pointed to had to kiss the other person. If they didn't want to kiss, they could choose to drink instead. Li Ainen was honored to be the first to play, but the bottle eventually stopped at Yu Fifan. Li Ainen glanced at Su Lang and silently picked up her glass. After a few rounds, Li Ainen was soon drunk and unconscious. Yu Fifan offered to take Li Ainen back to her room, but halfway there, Li Anan sat down on a bench and refused to leave. Looking at Li Anan in his arms, Euphefan's heart was once again filled with happiness. Then Li Anan muttered to herself, "You may act like a robot, but your heart is warm." Hearing this, a sense of guilt welled up in Euphefan's heart. He couldn't help but sigh. Perhaps this was why they had grown apart. The pain from his previous relationship had left Su Lang without the courage to pursue new love. Now, seeing Li Anan lying in Euphefan's arms, he realized that his connection with Li Anan could only go so far. With a heavy heart, he left. In reality, the drunk Li Anan had mistaken Euphefan for Su Lang. Euphefan was instantly heartbroken. It seemed that the Li Anan who once regarded him as everything was no longer there. In despair, he cut short his trip and returned to Shanghai. But upon arriving at the company, he received some bad news. The anime character Li Anan had created for Extraordinary Comics had been registered for copyright by the Eraser Company. Days earlier, the Eraser Company had approached Euphefan, proposing to use Li Anan's comic characters as the male and female protagonists for their new game. However, Li Anan had refused. With the release date of the new game looming, the Eraser Company learned that most of the non-contracted authors at Extraordinary Comics were not protected by copyright. As one of them, Li Anan's works naturally lacked copyright protection. So the Eraser Company seized this loophole and immediately registered the copyright of Li Anan's comic characters under its own company name. Euphefan firmly demanded that the company speak out on behalf of Li Anan and make the other company pay the price. As the company's legal counsel, Su Lang advised Euphefan not to act rashly. Once the other party had no way out, they would likely resort to desperate measures, which would result in heavy losses for the company. However, Euphefan refused to listen to anyone's advice. He was determined to retrieve the copyright for Li Anan. As Su Lang had anticipated, the Eraser Company immediately launched a counterattack upon receiving the statement. But their target was not the Extraordinary Studio, but the author Li Anan. This way, the Eraser Company protected its own reputation without offending the Extraordinary Studio. They then hired a lawyer to sue Li Anan. Wu Li learned that Euphefan was willing to sacrifice the company's reputation for Li Anan and fight against the Eraser Company. She wanted to take this opportunity to destroy Li Anan, so she sent the original manuscript she had obtained from Li Anan to the Eraser Company. She was clearly the original author, but now not only had her copyright been stolen, she was being sued by the other party. Li Anan was deeply saddened and placed all her hopes on Su Lang. Seeing Li Anan's hopeful gaze, Su Lang felt deeply moved. He comforted Li Anan while doing his best to gather more evidence for her. However, as a seasoned lawyer, Su Lang knew that they had no chance of winning this case. But even so, Su Lang was determined to stand by Li Anan and face this battle together, even if it meant losing his perfect record of never losing a case in the legal field. He didn't want Li Anan to be hurt. Soon, the day of the trial arrived, but it wasn't until today that they found out the opposing lawyer was Shin Man. No wonder Su Lang had been trying to negotiate a settlement with the other side, but their lawyer had refused to show up. In court, Shin Man dismissed all of Su Lang's witnesses one by one. Finally, he presented the original manga draft provided by Wu Li and turned it against Li Anan. Li Anan not only lost her copyright, but also had to take all her previous works off the shelves. She even had to issue a public apology to the other party's company. Seeing what originally belonged to her being taken by someone else and herself becoming the guilty party, Li Anan felt as if she had been stabbed in the back. She couldn't hold back any longer and threw herself on Su Lang's chest and cried loudly. But in the adult world, who isn't collapsing and healing at the same time? After venting her emotions, Li Anan wiped away her tears and got off the car to go home. Watching Li Anan's departing figure, Su Lang felt heartbroken but helpless. That night, the depressed Li Anan went to a night market stall to drown her sorrows in alcohol. She had thought that the night market after 10 p.m. would be a place filled with laughter and joy, but the reality was different, as there were others there who were just as sad as her. We come into this world naked, seemingly living among bustling crowds every day. But in the end, who isn't fighting alone? Su Lang was also restless at home. He understood Li Anan's pain and feared she might give up. He decided to call her, but there was no answer. He then went to Li Anan's house and knocked on the door for a long time, but there was no response. Su Lang panicked and immediately drove around the streets looking for Li Anan, but found nothing. Desperate, He returned home and looked through the glass at Li Ainen's house. He didn't know if Li Ainen was already asleep. At that moment, Shen Man suddenly appeared, and this time she was confrontational with Su Lang. Because of Li Ainen's case, Su Lang had lost his title of having never lost a case in the legal profession. Shen Man thought Su Lang would be heartbroken, but he wasn't, because at least this way, he could try to fight for Li Ainen one last time. He just didn't understand why Shen Man was helping the eraser company against Li Ainen. In the end, she even produced Li Ainen's original manuscript, causing him to lose the case. Shen Man saw that Su Lang was willing to give up his career for Li Ainen, which made her furious. Back then, she had given up her career in the UK and returned home without hesitation, hoping one day to reunite with Su Lang. She was confident that Su Lang still loved her as before and would forgive her for leaving without a word 5 years ago. But when she finally gathered the courage to tell Su Lang she wanted to start over at the resort, Su Lang said, "We can never be together in this lifetime." These words dealt Shen Man a fatal blow. She decided that she would never ask Su Lang to love her again. Shen Man secretly vowed to make Su Lang's life miserable in the future. When Su Lang was happy, she would watch him from nearby. When Su Lang was in pain, she would watch him suffer. After losing the copyright to her work, Li Ainen felt a strong sense of defeat. She felt that she was ultimately incapable of fulfilling her dreams, so she gave up on creating comics. After throwing away all her work, she returned to the coffee shop to work as a waitress again. Seeing Li Ainen's current situation, Xiao Di and Lei Yu could only stand by and advise her. When her godmother found out about this, she also found Li Ainen and told her that she shouldn't give up comics when she was only one step away from success. Instead of working as a waitress in this coffee shop, she should take advantage of her youth and go for it. At first, Li Ainen didn't believe that she would give up, but after going through so much, she really intended to give up from the bottom of her heart. Now, she just wanted to do something to fill her time, without talking about plans or dreams. Later, Lucy also found her and persuaded her to work together to open a studio of their own. When Lucy's life was in darkness, it was Li Ainen who brought her out of it. So this time, Lucy wanted to take this opportunity to help her face the ugliness of the real world. But at this point in her life, Li Ainen was constantly doubting herself and didn't have the courage to start over. So she ultimately rejected Lucy's proposal. That day, Su Lang came to the coffee shop to find Li Ainen to sign a document. Li Ainen had thought Su Lang would try to persuade her like they had, but he didn't. Su Lang casually handed her the document and gave her a pen. This familiar scene reminded Li Ainen of several months ago when Yu Fifan divorced her. It was in the same place, in the same way, that she had signed the divorce agreement in despair. This time, Su Lang only talked about work and nothing else, but this cold Su Lang made Li Ainen feel unusually at ease. As for Su Lang, he wasn't unconcerned about Li Ainen. He just understood that what Li Ainen needed most at that moment was empathy and understanding. Li Ainen suddenly let go of the heavy burden on her heart, and her mood brightened instantly. Perhaps Su Lang was the one who understood her best at that moment. Meanwhile, Yu Fifan pondered for a while, intending to call Li Ainen to comfort her, but the phone on the other end indicated it was turned off. Yu Fifan panicked and rushed out to find Li Ainen, disregarding the company's promotional meeting. However, he was stopped by his assistant. Since the last time he had a major altercation with the opposing company due to a failed lawsuit, the reputation of Extraordinary Studio had been severely damaged. If the press were to capture any footage this time, it could potentially cause further unnecessary negative publicity for the company. Therefore, the assistant insisted on preventing Yu Fifan from going to find Li Ainen. At that moment, Wooly suddenly returned from Canada and told Yu Fifan that she had come back to stay at Extraordinary Comics for the long term. That evening, Wooly prepared a feast at Yu Fifan's villa. After dressing up carefully, she invited Yu Fifan over to celebrate her birthday together. She took the opportunity to express her desire to take care of Yu Fifan for the rest of her life. In fact, Yu Fifan only regarded her as his most valued student. He didn't want to give Wooly any more false hope. He then said that he and Li Ainen had known each other for 10 years. They had so many wonderful memories together, and they also had a child. Therefore, Li Anan was very important to him, so he rejected Wu Li on the spot. Yu Feifan's bluntness deeply hurt Wu Li's heart, but she had no intention of giving up. Today was the day Dodo was scheduled to have his cast removed after leg surgery. Li Anan declined Su Lang's offer and brought her son to the hospital alone. However, shortly after Dodo entered the hospital, it was completely locked down. Li Anan, who had gone to the stairwell to make a call due to poor signal, found herself locked inside. She frantically called out, but no one responded. Worried that Dodo might be scared alone, Li Anan called Shodi, but the news she received sent her into a state of panic. Li Anan tried to escape but was threatened by the other party, who even turned off her phone. To find a way to keep Li Anan and Dodo together, Shodi made calls everywhere seeking help. Finally, she thought of Yu Feifan, believing he had extensive connections and must have a way to rescue Li Anan, so she sent a message to Yu Feifan. In fact, Yu Feifan's phone had already fallen into Wu Li's hands. Just now, Wu Li had learned that Yu Feifan had changed a lot during the time she was away. Moreover, he went straight home to spend time with Dodo after work, even leaving early for today's important celebration. This news made Wu Li feel very uneasy. To prevent Yu Feifan and Li Anan from meeting, she replied to the message in Yu Feifan's name. Shodi had no choice but to call Leiyu. At that moment, Su Lang finally learned that Li Anan was in danger. He immediately drove to the hospital at full speed. Unfortunately, the hospital had already been sealed off, and they couldn't get in. But Su Lang couldn't wait another minute. In desperation, he stole the protective gear from a nearby car and managed to enter the hospital. Su Lang frantically searched for Li Anan's figure, but the phone wouldn't connect. Meanwhile, Li Anan, risking infection, had a heart-to-heart chat with the other party. Finally, she was allowed to make a call. At that moment, Li Anan, terrified, could only think of Su Lang. She just wanted to call Su Lang to tell him that she was okay. Unexpectedly, as soon as she turned on her phone, she received a call from Su Lang. Li Anan's heart instantly felt half relieved. Then she learned that Su Lang was also in the hospital. Li Anan was so moved that she almost cried. Su Lang hurriedly ran to the place Li Anan told him. Every time Li Anan encountered difficulties, Su Lang would always appear in time to help her out of danger. Perhaps it was fate that Su Lang was the person she could entrust her life to. Listening to Su Lang's simple yet warm words, Li Anan was moved to tears. This time, she decided to hold on tightly to the one she loved and no longer hide. She slowly placed her hand in Su Lang's. Meanwhile, Yu Feifan, after finishing the company's celebration event, learned about Li Anan's situation from Qiudi. Qiudi asked Yu Feifan why he told her not to worry about Li Anan anymore. Yu Feifan was confused by the question and only then realized that his cell phone had been in Wu Li's hands the whole time. He instantly understood everything. Now he finally saw Wu Li's true colors. After Li Anan was rescued from the hallway, she was quarantined in a hospital room because she had come into contact with someone infected with Ebola. She and Su Lang could only communicate through an intercom, but even though there was a door between them, it couldn't stop them from being happy together. Li Anan asked Su Lang if there was anything else he wanted to say to her. Su Lang pretended not to understand and said he couldn't think of anything. It wasn't until Li Anan placed her hand on the glass that Su Lang shyly lowered his head, but the words were on the tip of his tongue, and he couldn't bring himself to speak. Just as Li Anan thought Su Lang had really left, Su Lang's voice suddenly came through the intercom. After all, it had been so many years since he had spoken those words. He had finally mustered up the courage to say them, but he was mocked by Li Anan. At that moment, Su Lang wanted nothing more than to disappear from Li Anan's sight. Although Li Anan was smiling on the outside, she was actually overjoyed on the inside. So even though they were separated by glass, she felt happy when they held hands. That night, Yu Feifan came to the hospital to visit Li Anan. He expressed his guilt for being late. Perhaps it was because he no longer loved her that he no longer cared. Li Anan was no longer angry with him like she used to be. Instead, she began to understand his work. Yu Feifan blamed himself for always using this excuse to convince himself, which caused him to lose the person he should have taken care of the most. Li Anan said that she would work hard on her own in the future. Yu Feifan asked Wu Li why he sent such a message in his name. Wu Li openly admitted that he did it to stop Yu Feifan from looking for Li Anan. She was not willing to be just a student in Yu Feifan's eyes. Seeing how cruel Wu Li had become, Eufefin felt very disgusted, so he decided on the spot to have her move out of the villa. That night, Lianen went to Su Lang's house to take the sleeping Dodo home, but Su Lang said reluctantly, "Let him sleep a little longer, then you can take him home." Lianen immediately responded with a look that said, "I understand." The two instantly felt their emotions getting out of control. Lianen then pushed Su Lang against the wall. The hormones in both of them began to rise, but just as they were about to get close, they were interrupted by the child. The two were suddenly at a loss for words. After being with Su Lang, Lianen felt much more at ease. She finally decided to fulfill her dream of becoming a manga artist. With that came even better news. The Creative New Forces competition, held once every 4 years, was about to take place. This was an important opportunity to promote her manga work and become a world-renowned intellectual property. The editor-in-chief was very optimistic about Lianen and Lucy's work, so he secured a very rare spot for the two of them. But after going through so much, Lianen was no longer sure if she was really capable of participating in the competition. Whenever she couldn't make up her mind, Su Lang was always able to untie the knot in her heart. When she found out that Su Lang was running at the gym, Lianen went straight there to find him. Lianen then told Su Lang about her troubles. Su Lang told her that since she had never participated in such a competition before, she might as well take this opportunity to determine her position in the industry. Even if she lost, at least she would gain some experience. He hoped she could create something truly positive and uplifting. Su Lang's words made her snap out of her daze, and she immediately agreed to go home and prepare. This unexpected invitation made Lianen feel energized. She went home and put on a sexy little white dress. Su Lang also prepared a candlelit dinner for their date and even brought champagne. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Lianen arrived at Su Lang's house as planned. As soon as she entered the door, she was amazed by Su Lang's cooking skills. Looking at the wine that had been prepared in advance, Lianen gave Su Lang a mischievous smile. Feeling a little excited inside, Su Lang then complimented Lianen on how beautiful she looked that day. Under the romantic atmosphere of the lights and wine, the two of them couldn't help but draw closer to each other. Just as the two were enjoying their romantic candlelit dinner, they were suddenly interrupted by a call from Eufefin. At that moment, Eufefin was alone in a bar, drinking to drown his sorrows. He then called Su Lang out. It turned out that after Lianen's copyright lawsuit, Su Lang had decided to terminate his contract with Extraordinary Comics. However, in Eufefen's view, Su Lang's departure was not merely due to work-related issues. He confronted Su Lang, asking if the contract termination was because of Lianen. Su Lang did not deny it. Upon learning that Lianen had other men in her life, Eufefen felt deeply disappointed. Considering that the three of them had indeed struggled to find a suitable way to get along in such a short time, he believed that Su Lang's departure might be the right choice. After hesitating for a moment, Eufefen finally couldn't help but ask, "Are you really together?" Su Lang's firm answer left Eufefen heartbroken, but at this point, he was powerless even with all his abilities. He could no longer win Lianen's heart. At this moment, Eufefen felt out of place in this noisy world. Flipping through his phone contacts and seeing the note wife, scenes from their wedding day unconsciously flashed through his mind. He thought of their happy past and his own determination on the day of their divorce. Looking back, it was he who pushed Lianen away from him time and time again. Now he had no choice but to accept the fact that Lianen had completely left him. From then on, there would be no more wife in his phone contacts. However, before he could recover from Lianen's departure, another problem arose at Extraordinary Studio. On that day, it was suddenly revealed that Han Fei's comics were based on plagiarism. The news spread like wildfire throughout the comic industry. As a senior contracted author at Extraordinary Studio, Han Fei's reputation was ruined overnight. However, the mastermind behind all this was none other than Wu Li. Since returning from Canada, Wu Li had officially signed with Extraordinary Comics as a contracted author. But with the Creative New Forces event approaching, Extraordinary Studio refused to consider Wu Li's ideas. Wu Li was very dissatisfied. In order to fight for a chance to participate in the competition, she took the initiative to contact a reporter. Just like that, Wu Li got her wish and became a participant in Creative New Forces. However, just as she was feeling happy, She looked up and saw the person she least wanted to see in her entire life. She was then kidnapped by the other party and taken to the stairwell. It can truly be said that evil people will always be punished by other evil people. This person was none other than Wu Li's ex-boyfriend. 7 years ago, he had been imprisoned for murdering someone for Wu Li. Now, upon his release, he had immediately tracked her down. Wu Li assumed that Zhong Su was harassing her for money. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bank card, intending to dismiss him. On that day, Su Lang brought Lianen to attend the wedding of the professor's daughter. Also present was Su Lang's ex-girlfriend, Shen Man. Shen Man saw her beloved holding another woman's hand and became furious. She then walked over to Lianen with hatred in her heart. Do you know what happened to him 5 years ago? Do you know who Su Lang's mother is? Do you know why he disappeared for 5 years? It seems you don't know Su Lang at all. Shen Man finished speaking and turned away arrogantly, leaving Lianen alone to brood. It turns out that Shen Man had just learned from their conversation that Su Lang had been in a serious car accident the year she left. He even went to Thailand to recuperate for a long time and cut off all contact with everyone. Shen Man could never go back to Su Lang. Lianen knew that Shen Man had never forgotten Su Lang. She was also very confident that Su Lang loved her. She thought she knew Su Lang well enough, but now it seemed that she knew nothing about Su Lang. At this moment, she felt more like Su Lang's lifeline. Perhaps Su Lang was with her to use a new relationship to forget the past. Feeling depressed, Lianen decided to go out alone to get some fresh air. It was only when Su Lang called her that she told him what Shen Man had said. Su Lang saw Lianen's disappointment and wanted to comfort her. Lianen bluntly said, "I want to know what really happened here." But this matter had always been Su Lang's nightmare, something he dared not mention. Therefore, he did not want to tell anyone, including Lianen. Don't try to dig into things I don't want to talk about, because it might not be that I don't want to, but that I can't. Lianen had always believed that two people in love would not hide anything from each other. But Su Lang's answer instantly made Lianen feel a distance between her and Su Lang, so she turned away dejectedly and wandered alone through the streets at night. Before she knew it, she had walked to the bar that had witnessed every heartbreaking moment of her life. Here, Su Lang had saved her twice when she was drunk out of her mind. Today, she walked in again and sat down at her usual spot. At that moment, Yu Fifan was also there, drowning his sorrows in alcohol. When he heard that familiar voice, he turned around and saw Lianen. Yu Fifan was a little surprised. Lianen was very surprised. She didn't expect Yu Fifan to have time to come to the bar. Yu Fifan took out his cell phone, which was turned off, and said that he had been so busy that he forgot about his troubles. Now he was so annoyed that he didn't know what to do. The 6 years they spent as husband and wife allowed Lianen to see through Yu Fifan's heartache. You always wanted to take care of everyone and make sure everything was perfect. You thought that was a man's responsibility. In the end, Lianen was the one who understood her best. But now, all he could do was regret it. At that moment of despair, Wu Li suddenly walked over. Lianen saw this and was about to leave, but Yu Fifan stopped her. Wu Li had come to invite Yu Fifan to attend an event for a new creative force. Since learning that Wu Li had gone to great lengths to prevent him from meeting Lianen last time, Yu Fifan had completely seen through her. He believed she was a person without principles or boundaries, and thus had expelled her from the villa. Wu Li knew that if she left the tickets in Yu Fifan's office, he would never look at them, so she decided to hand them to him personally. But even then, Yu Fifan ignored her and walked away with Lianen. Watching them leave, Wu Li seethed with anger. The next day, unwilling to give up, she found Yu Fifan again. She wanted to invite him to attend the event as a signed author of extraordinary comics. Upon hearing this, Yu Fifan was furious. He knew full well that Han Fei's plagiarism scandal was Wu Li's doing. Yu Fifan was deeply offended by Wu Li's actions and threw the tickets at her before leaving. That day, Lianen was struggling with her competition entry and came to seek advice from Han Fei. Unexpectedly, she learned from Han Fei that Wu Li had used so many despicable means against her. No wonder she had been so unlucky at work. Lianen walked down the street feeling depressed. If it weren't for Wu Li, her career would probably be thriving. Unexpectedly, she looked up and suddenly saw Wu Li. At that moment, Wu Li was looking around fearfully. She suspected that someone was following her. Lianen mocked Wu Li, saying that after doing so many dishonest things, she must be feeling guilty. Wu Li not only showed no remorse but instead said confidently, I only care about winning. I don't care if I'm right or wrong, or if I deserve it or not. Lianen was instantly impressed by Wu Li's unprincipled approach, but this time, Lianen wouldn't choose to tolerate it like before. She formally declared war on Wu Li. This time, the new creative force was unprecedentedly fair. She warned Wu Li not to try to use her despicable methods against herself anymore. Seeing Yu Fifan being loved by such a woman, Lianen couldn't help but feel sorry for Yu Fifan. Hearing Lianen say this, Wu Li was very dissatisfied and slapped Lianen. Just then, two kidnappers suddenly appeared. Lianen grabbed Wu Li and tried to escape, but to regain Lianen's trust, Wu Li voluntarily offered to let Lianen leave first. During her escape, Wu Li encountered her ex-boyfriend Zhong Su. It turned out that Zhong Su had resorted to this desperate measure to get Wu Li back. To keep Zhong Su calm, Wu Li put on another act. They say that when you're in love, your intelligence drops to zero. Zhong Su was quickly brainwashed by Wu Li's sweet words and decided to follow her lead. After escaping, Lianen ran into Yu Fifan. Upon learning of the situation, Yu Fifan rushed over to find Wu Li. Upon hearing Yu Fifan's voice, the few bandits panicked. They pulled out knives, intending to fight Yu Fifan to the death. But the knife in front of them gave Wu Li another idea. After a moment of thought, he steeled his resolve and charged forward. Upon learning that Lianen had encountered bandits, Su Lang rushed over in a hurry. However, he found that Lianen had already finished giving his statement and left. He hurriedly called Lianen. Unbeknownst to them, they were blocked from view by a nearby carousel. Seeing that Lianen was unharmed, Su Lang finally relaxed. However, he knew that Lianen still had an unresolved issue weighing on her mind. Therefore, on the way home, the two chose to remain silent. Once they entered the house, Su Lang couldn't help but come out again. He knew he had to give Lianen an explanation, so he decided to take a shortcut to find Lianen. Unexpectedly, Lianen pushed open the door at that moment. Seeing Su Lang doing such a ridiculous thing at his age, Lianen's anger instantly dissipated by half. She then said that she had also done something wrong. Su Lang hugged Lianen tightly. He still hadn't gotten over Lianen's dangerous ordeal. He was so afraid that something would happen to Lianen that he almost thought he was going to lose her. After this experience, Su Lang finally opened up to Lianen. I promise I'll tell you everything that happened, but please give me some time. Wu Li was rushed to the hospital by Yu Fifan after being stabbed in the abdomen and losing a lot of blood. Considering that she had just saved Lianen, Yu Fifan wanted to give her another chance. However, she had done so many terrible things to Lianen in the past, so he wasn't sure if she was truly remorseful this time. He wanted to hear from Wu Li herself if she had done anything else to Lianen. This suddenly reminded Wu Li that she had broken Dodo's arm, but seeing that Yu Fifan was finally willing to forgive her, if she told him about this now, then she would never have a chance with Yu Fifan. After much deliberation, she decided to keep it a secret. That day, Su Lang and Lianen were in the courtyard, acting affectionate toward each other. Suddenly, his mother returned home with her daughter, startling Lianen, who fled in panic. At that moment, Shen Man appeared. It turned out that Su Lang's mother disapproved of Lianen and had been trying to match her son with Shen Man. However, Shen Man's true purpose for coming was not merely to have a meal. She took advantage of Su Lang's mother's absence to sneak into Su Lang's room and take a photo of Guigua's birth certificate. It turned out that ever since she learned about Su Lang's car accident 5 years ago, Shen Man had always suspected that Guigua was not her biological daughter. As she had suspected, Guigua was indeed not her biological daughter. The birth certificate showed that Su Guo was born in Thailand 6 years ago. At that time, she and Su Lang were deeply in love, so it was impossible for him to have another woman, let alone a daughter. Hu Jun advised her that since she already knew what she wanted to know, she should not continue investigating. Otherwise, the results would only hurt more people. But Shen Man insisted on investigating and wanted to use this to get revenge on Su Lang. On this day, Lianen took Su Lang to a role-playing event held at a comic cafe. Shen Man also followed them there. Seeing Su Lang and Lianen laughing and talking together, she felt very uncomfortable, so she found Lianen and told her that Su Lang was not Su Guo's biological father. She also told Lianen that if a man is not willing to share his most important experiences with you, then how much can he love you? These words deeply hurt Li Ainan's heart. She had always been curious about Su Lang's past. Now it seemed that Su Lang had kept something from her because he didn't love her enough. Shen Man then found Su Lang and asked him why he didn't tell Guogua that he wasn't her biological father. This question immediately reopened Su Lang's wounds. Guogua's death had always been a taboo subject for him, so he never mentioned it to anyone. Now that Shen Man had revealed it to everyone, Su Lang was in so much pain that he could hardly breathe. In despair, he tells Shen Man everything, intending to put an end to their relationship once and for all. All along, Shen Man has been determined to take revenge on Su Lang for the pain he caused her. All the suffering Su Lang has endured over the years was because of her. At this moment, Su Lang calls out to Li Ainan, who was hiding behind him. He never expected Li Ainan to choose to cooperate with an outsider just to find out about his past. Li Ainan then asks, "If it weren't for today, would you have told me all this?" Su Lang replied firmly that he wouldn't. Now, the man she loved deeply didn't even have the most basic trust in her. Li Ainan suddenly felt that her feelings were worthless, but even so, she still chose to be honest with Su Lang. She told Su Lang that she was curious about his past because she wanted to understand him better. She hoped that Su Lang could get out of his own world as soon as possible. She wanted him to speak about his pain and listen to others. She hoped that she could become Su Lang's comrade in arms and help him. Finally, from the perspective of an outsider, Li Ainan hoped that Su Lang would tell Guogua the truth. If he hadn't divorced Li Ainan, Yu Fifan might not have understood that in the end, Li Ainan was the person who understood him best. In order to escape reality, Yu Fifan turned off his cell phone and hid away by himself. After several days of not being able to find him, his assistant was on the verge of breaking down. With no other options, he found Li Ainan. After all, they had been lovers for 4 years and married for 6. Li Ainan effortlessly found Yu Fifan in no time. The heartfelt pleas of others couldn't compare to Li Ainan's few words of comfort. Yu Fifan's mood was quickly healed by Li Ainan. He was then sent back to the extraordinary studio by Li Ainan. After witnessing all this, Wu Li was very dissatisfied. She didn't expect that Yu Fifan, whom she had searched for with great difficulty, was brought back so easily by Li Ainan. So she found Li Ainan and vented her anger on him. However, by now, Li Ainan had already seen through Wu Li's true colors. Therefore, when faced with Wu Li's sharp and harsh words, she no longer chose to ignore her and immediately rebutted her. Yu Fifan is not just anyone to me. He is Dodo's father and my family. This relationship will never change. Hearing Li Ainan say this, Wu Li became even more furious and revealed a malicious expression. "Don't dare to compete with me. You won't stand a chance." Having witnessed Wu Li's cunning nature, Li Ainan advised her to behave properly in broad daylight. However, old habits die hard, and Wu Li did not give up. Today was the opening exhibition of the Creative New Forces event. Wu Li had already found out that Li Ainan would not be participating, but upon arriving at the venue, she discovered that Li Ainan's painting had appeared on the wall in the last hour. It turned out that Han Fei, whose career had plummeted after being accused of plagiarism by Wu Li, had approached Li Ainan afterward and decided to help her win the first prize at this year's Creative New Forces event as revenge against Wu Li. After Han Fei's guidance, Li Ainan's paintings were well received by numerous brands upon exhibition. Wu Li panicked upon seeing this, as according to the online voting results, she should have won the first prize in this competition. Now it seemed that the outcome might not be what she had hoped for. However, the rules of the event stated that if a participant failed to arrive on time, they would be disqualified. Upon learning that Li Ainan was preparing to leave for the venue, Wu Li immediately came up with another plan. She then called her ex-boyfriend, and shortly after, Li Ainan was involved in a traffic accident on the way. Wu Li was certain that Li Ainan would not abandon her in her time of need, so she asked Zhong Su to deliberately play the victim to win Li Ainan's sympathy, and then take him to the hospital to delay Li Ainan. Su Lang had been silently following Li Ainan. At the critical moment, Su Lang appeared. As a lawyer, how could he not see that this was a deliberately staged traffic accident? Although he knew that he had violated traffic regulations, Zhong Su had no intention of letting Li Ainan off the hook. Seeing this, Su Lang picked up his cell phone to call the police. Zhong Su, upon hearing this, immediately grew afraid and quietly left. Under Su Lang's escort, Li Ainan finally arrived at the venue just in time. Han Fei's guidance infused Li Ainan's work with soul. and the moving story quickly touched the audience. In the end, she won first place and became the highest bid work of the auction. This result finally dashed Wu Li's hopes, but she could only cry alone in silence. That evening, Yufifan tried to comfort her and encourage her to let go. That day, Guigua accidentally discovered the spinning carousel in her father's room. She intended to take it out to play but accidentally broke it. A recording then began to play. This scene was witnessed by Lianen, who had just entered the room. The voice piqued Guigua's curiosity. She didn't know who the person was or why they mentioned her name, but she vaguely felt that this person was her mother. Seeing this, Lianen knew that the opportunity had come. After hesitating for a moment, she decided to take the chance to tell her the truth. At that moment, Su Lang suddenly appeared. Seeing the spinning carousel on the ground, his emotions immediately ran wild. He then sent Guigua away and berated Lianen. Lianen explained that since Guigua had already heard her mother's voice, this was a good opportunity. It was better to tell her now than have her find out from someone else later. At that moment, Lianen's heart collapsed. It seemed that she had not won Su Lang's heart, so she left dejectedly. On the other side, Yufifan was celebrating Wu Li's second prize in the Creative New Forces competition. Just then, an assistant suddenly came in and handed him a hard drive. It contained all the footage of Yufifan taking Dodo to parent-child activities. Looking at the hard drive, Wu Li's heart suddenly panicked. She knew that it also contained the entire process of her framing Dodo. If Yufifan saw the videos inside, all her previous efforts would be ruined. So she made an excuse to help Yufifan edit the video in order to get the hard drive. Unexpectedly, Dodo suddenly came over. Upon learning that there were videos of herself inside, Dodo insisted on taking it back to watch. Wu Li had no choice but to find Zhong-su again. Taking advantage of his unwavering devotion to her, she made a bold request. Zhong-su couldn't resist Wu Li's sweet talk and decided to risk his life for her once again. That day, upon learning that Lianen and Su Lang were both out, Wu Li instructed Zhong-su to act. After a thorough search, he finally found the hard drive. However, he didn't seem in a hurry to leave. He walked into the kitchen, took a drink from the refrigerator, and sipped it leisurely. Unexpectedly, when he turned around, he saw Guigua. Zhong-su was afraid that his identity would be exposed, so he knocked Guigua unconscious and carried her away. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Wu Li was so scared that she didn't know what to do. If the other party exposed her, her life would be completely over. The police had already located them through investigation. Guigua was eventually rescued, but due to the extreme trauma, she developed post-traumatic stress disorder and suddenly lost the ability to speak. What was even stranger was that whenever Guigua saw Su Lang, she would burst into tears and immediately throw herself into Lianen's arms. At that moment, Su Lang's heart was shattered. After psychological analysis, it was clear that Guigua's psychological issues stemmed from Su Lang. It was determined that the psychological trauma inflicted on Guigua was not solely caused by the kidnapping incident, but also by other unexpected events that occurred during the kidnapping. It turned out that after Guigua was kidnapped, Wu Li learned from Shen Man's chat with Xiao Wu that Guigua was not Su Lang's biological daughter. She then used this information to try to dissuade the kidnappers from demanding a ransom. Unexpectedly, the kidnappers became angry and furious. That's why Guigua drew a black shadow of her father. Seeing that the daughter he had raised since childhood now didn't even want to see him, Su Lang's emotions collapsed. If he had known this would happen, he should have listened to Lianen's advice earlier. If he had told her about this early on, she wouldn't have had to hear such cruel news from someone else. Fortunately, Lianen had been by his side the entire time, never leaving him. Seeing that Guigua loved drawing, Lianen spent every day with her, drawing together. Thanks to Lianen's motherly care, Guigua's condition quickly improved. Meanwhile, among the kidnappers who had abducted Guigua, Zhong-su had died from his injuries. One was captured, while the other remained on the run. Soon, Wu Li received a call from the kidnappers demanding a large sum of money. However, Wu Li didn't have that much money, but to resolve the matter, she eventually decided to target her mother's shop. Upon returning home, she first gave her mother a bank card. Just as her mother felt relieved, she took the business license and her father's ID from the store and used them as collateral to obtain 200,000 yuan. In the end, She used the money to retrieve the hard drive containing evidence of her crimes. She also made sure to retrieve the phone used in the call with the other party. Upon returning home, she set fire to destroy all evidence, but just as she believed everything was over, Wooly suddenly discovered that the hard drive did not contain the video of Yufifan and Dodo's parent-child activities. The hard drive she sought was still in Dodo's possession. Moreover, her actions had been witnessed by Lianen. Wooly's parents were soon tracked down by creditors. Upon learning that Wooly was responsible, her father refused to repay the debt. Unexpectedly, during the argument, he suffered a heart attack and died on the spot. The police then found Wooly for questioning. However, when faced with the police's questions, Wooly deliberately avoided answering. To hide her panic, she remained calm and composed. After the police left, she collapsed on the sofa. Wooly thought she had escaped, but in fact, the police already had evidence of her crimes. Companionship is the most sincere confession. Only now did Su Lang finally understand that Lianen was the person he was most worth protecting. It was because of Lianen's companionship that father and daughter were able to reconcile. It was also because of Lianen's companionship that Su Lang was able to get through the worst time of his life. Wooly felt that her father's death was not sad, but rather a relief. Not only that, but she also felt that her mother was superfluous in her heart. So she warned her mother that her life would get better and better and told her not to show up in her life anymore. She was about to pay the price for what she had done. When Lianen saw the video of Wooly framing her son, he didn't choose to expose her in front of her. Instead, he found Yufifan and planned to put on a show to make Wooly fall into the trap herself. Therefore, as soon as Wooly entered the door, Lianen deliberately said, "Dodo only watched that hard drive for a while before getting bored." Wooly heard this and paused for a moment, her mind already forming a new plan. Sure enough, on the day of the fashion show, Wooly kept a close eye on Lianen's every move. When she saw Lianen put her bag in the room, she immediately sprang into action. She secretly ran in and got the hard drive that recorded her crimes. Seeing that her plan had been exposed, Wooly finally lowered her proud head and knelt in front of Lianen. She begged Lianen not to hand the evidence over to the police, but as a mother, how could Lianen easily forgive someone who had hurt her son? At this moment, Yufifan, who had been hiding behind, also came out. Wooly pinned her hopes on Yufifan again. She begged Yufifan to help her and let Lianen let her go. She thought Yufifan would forgive her for all her mistakes as he had done before. At this moment, Yufifan was extremely disappointed in her. In the end, Wooly was taken away by the police. Everything she cared about was gone. Lianen finally achieved her goal through her own efforts and became the center of attention. After going through so much, I believe that no matter what difficulties Lianen encounters in the future, she will no longer be that little girl who cries in secret. In the end, Shenman no longer forced Su Lang to love her, but entrusted herself to the man who loved her wholeheartedly. Qiu Di and Lei Yu also had a happy ending. Lianen and Su Lang finally lived their own lives, with honesty and mutual trust, and a touch of romance in their ordinary lives. I think every single mother is constantly breaking down and becoming stronger in the chaos of life. Although you may be experiencing emotional setbacks now, please don't give up. Work hard to make yourself better, and then the happiness that belongs to you will surely be on its way.